welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. Today we come as a part 3 of our series on Fali Nariman. As we said, we are celebrating his life. It's not a time of mourning, 95 years well lived. And so much to say that 3 weeks ago, we were standing at IIC for 1 hour behind the mic and giving a lecture on constitutional law. That was the commitment to work of that gentleman, and also the fitness which he had. That at the age of 95, you could stand behind a mic, not sit, but stand. Pertinent to mention for somebody who's 95. And who better to speak on Fali Nariman than a man who is himself a professed workaholic, who anytime you call him or see him is working, dealing on calls with multiple clients, or talking to senior counsels in Supreme Court. I would like to welcome Mr. Mahesh Agarwal. He is managing partner of Agarwal Law Associates, one of India's leading litigation law firms at the Supreme Court of India. Good to see Mr. Agarwal. And at the outset, your comments.
I've had the fortune of working with Mr. Nariman very closely for last over 30 years. In 93, I became a lawyer. I think my first few matters, I was at his office. And it was such an enriching, amazing experience with him that is unparalleled. I have not seen anybody else working with the kind of focus and the zeal to win as he was. 8 a.m. in the morning, every day, Monday to Friday, we used to be in his office. And the kind of insight on his face, you could see that clever look that I have to find a solution and win the case. It's hard to find. One important thing he always told us was that if you have lost in 3 courts below, no point repeating the same old story, same old argument. Use your mind, use your brain, close your eyes, close the file, think of the case, find an answer, find an argument, and you will get it. And you will not believe that so many times when we follow that practice now, that we think about the matter with closed eyes, you do find a solution. So he was a person from day one who used to think out of the box, out of the file. Tell him what the problem is, he will think about it and give a solution. So his hardcore was hard work and a solution finder. In the court, he had a 360-degree view. A master strategist and master courtcraft. So he was at the same time listening what the judge is saying, seeing what they're discussing, seeing what the other side lawyer is doing, seeing his briefing lawyer, the client. He had a 360-degree view of the matter to use the key words which would win the case.
Very interesting.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Very well put. I want to know something from you. You, as I said in your introduction, you are a professed workaholic. You work all the time. Sundays, there is no Saturday. You don't take leaves. You are known to work
people like Nariman.
So that's why I want to know, when you look at a gentleman like Mr. Fali Nariman, who worked right up to the time he lived. In fact, we were told that 2 days before he passed away, he was being briefed by a team of 3 lawyers to appear in the Supreme Court of India. What inspiration do you get from people like him?
He loved law. That was his life. He just loved it. And the nuances of problems, nuances of sections, it was like a song going through his mind. Every case was like a song where he used to kind of enjoy it and celebrate the case. So if you give him a problem, you have lost in court, 3 courts, and something has to be found, his mind will work like electric speed. And across books, across sections, across acts, and find a solution for you. So the idea was that if he gets a case, he was very selective. I mean, he used to take, if you give him 10 cases, he'll take 3. But not that he will take only winning cases. He will take the challenging cases, which are difficult to win, which require hard work and require labor. So
one thing I
to work.
I see now you are a well-known commercial lawyer. You yourself are present in court for some of the top commercial disputes in the country. So you watch commercial lawyers arguing in court very closely on a day-to-day basis. Mr. Fali Nariman was known as a top commercial lawyer. What do you see in him which made him stand out And when you compare him with the counsels of his era, which I think most of them have left the world now, but what qualities do you think he had as a commercial mind, as a commercial lawyer?
See, he had a very commercial mind. He could look for a commercial solution. And end of the conference, what he used to do was, okay, let's see if I am a judge, what would a judge do? And draft an order. 9 on 10 cases, he used to go to the court with a proposed order in the sense that he had an aim that I'm going to get this or I'm going to try for this. And after kind of facilitating in his mind, ki, how is it possible? So he would look at the problem, think like a judge, think of a solution, look to a proposed order, not that it's a complete what the client wants, but something which is possible and work towards it. So many times I've seen that he used to actually hand over the proposed order to the court, and the court would find or the judges would find it acceptable. Yeah, Mr. Nariman, that's possible. Why not? Let's do that. So that kind of a quality of working on a draft, which he wants to achieve, was simply amazing.
Mr. Agarwal, you work with some of the top counsels of India every day. So you know arguing styles of most of them. Some people are persuasive, some people are loud in the court, some people put their points very subtly, some people hover around the argument for the judge to arrive at that point. They will try to into. What was Mr. Fali Nariman's arguing style in your view?
Quite different from everybody else. Quite different. He basically thought of the judge's mind and prepared a sentence or an argument which the judge would get interested in. Not just what the client is saying or what we are saying. He will get into the judge's mind and plan an argument or plan a sequence of things which the judge would find interesting. Now, this 136, which is the SLP before the Supreme Court, now nobody bothers about what is the question of law, how you prepare grounds, nobody bothers. When he used to settle an SLP, he used to start with an interesting question of law, which is not decided, present it to the court, which the judge would like to decide. So he knew how to interest the judge. Out of 50 matters that the judge is doing, he was able to get the judge's mind and interest into the case.
One thing that I would like to know from you, to be relevant in the Supreme Court, right up to 95, for an arguing counsel, I mean, you're not a law firm, you have to go to court, you have to argue matters. What does a lawyer need, and what he had in him, not in the 60s, 80s, late 70s, say after 75 to 95, a period of full 20 years, 2 decades is a really long time. So active from 75 to 95, what did he have and what do counsels need to last? Because I remember Ram Jethmalani, and now in living examples, K.K. Venugopal, he goes to court, argues big cases. What did these people have? What did Mr. Fali Nariman have that allowed him to argue? What quality did he have?
So the quality is to be relevant in the court at this age. So how do you get relevant? Is the integrity, the stature, the admiration, and the respect which they have earned over the years keeps them going. It's not easy for a client to be convinced to brief a 95-year-old lawyer who will not be able to spend time, who will not be able to study, may not be able to stand in court for 5 hours. Still they will. Reason is this, that the kind of respect, if Mr. Nariman or Mr. Jethmalani as he then was, or Mr. Venugopal today enter the court, there is an aura of respect. The judge would like to hear them. So what they want is this admiration from the court.
Okay. One final comment before your last question for the day from my side would be, any personal feelings of what the bar has lost in Mr. Fali Nariman?
See, we have lost a great soul and a person with the highest integrity which we had ever in the court. A person who was so highly respected and followed. And the law which the Supreme Court has now laid down, there is a huge contribution by him in the labor which he put in, the legal points which he developed, and which you find now in the judgments. So his legacy is there to continue.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your joining us and speaking so frankly, forthrightly, and what you felt from the heart about the giant of law that was Fali Nariman. Thank you so very much. Appreciate your joining us. Hello and welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. This is the part 5 of our series on Fali Sam Nariman, and as we maintained, we are celebrating his life. It is not mourning for the reason that life, the life that he is led, it is indeed a life that should be celebrated. And also the kind of learnings and teachings that he is left behind for so many people. And his life indeed truly is an inspiration to many. That is why we celebrate the life of eminent jurist Fali Nariman. We have with us senior advocate Percival Bilimoria, well-known name in the arbitration and litigation circuit. He practices at the Supreme Court of India and Delhi High Court, and also does international and domestic arbitrations. Good to see you, Mr. Bilimoria. And first come first, your first 2 minutes opening comment on senior advocate, eminent jurist Fali Sam Nariman.
Thank you, Tarun. I'm a great proponent of this celebrating life of an eminent person. But in this case, I'm just looking for the right word. I'm a little wistful also. Look, what we have is the passing of an era. So while we celebrate, we should ensure that we do not forget some of the lessons that we learn from his life, both from his professional work that he's done, his contribution to the bar, as well as some of his personal attributes. So it's hard not to be a little wistful. You know, Mr. Nariman was buried right next to Soli Sorabji, another stalwart. And, one can't but help think that this is really, the end of a great era. Look, he was designated before you and I were even born, right? So it's not something that is to be forgotten easily. In law, there are, I believe, two schools of law, really. One is the chambers of the late H.D. Kanga in Bombay. And then you had Jimmy Dalachandji and Company in Delhi. I think these are the two organizations, the legal chambers that have contributed a lot to our culture, our legal culture. And Mr. Nariman was one of the main proponents of constitutional integrity, of the necessity to keep some of the fundamental rights going. Of course, he was also himself a admirer of the late Mr. Palkhiwala, who himself was also from the chambers of Mr. Kanga. So when you hear some of his anecdotes in his book, and when you hear him speaking, he's always a marvelous speaker, full of some delightful anecdotes. And one can't but help ruminate a little wistfully about a bygone era, because the culture that now prevails in litigation, with some sharp elbows, I think, we have a lot to learn from these stalwarts. One of the other aspects that one must pick up from him is he was always very respectful when arguing a matter. The judge may, in the profession, be his junior, but he treated the bench with utmost courtesy. And I think I remember him saying that, look, if you lose your temper, you have lost half the battle. And that's also another aspect that one must note, because nowadays it's not unusual for us to find that there are some people who believe in, articulating very loudly their position. And sometimes clients do want that because they get the feeling that, okay, here is a counsel who is fighting for me, for my rights. But sometimes what you can achieve through gentle persuasion. So there is one book in my library called The Art of Persuasion. And I think Mr. Nariman, whenever you see him argue a matter, he was the epitome of persuasion and strategy, because one must remember that all judges are human beings. And he knew exactly what what to expect from the judge in a particular matter. And he would craft his arguments in such a way that he didn't have to drive home the point. It was really the bench who would see the point in any event. And that is the skill of advocacy. One must also remember, why do we need good advocates? Because, see, in arbitration, you have something called documents only, where you submit your pleadings and evidence, and there's no need for oral arguments. And the arbitrator can come to a conclusion and, give you an award. But the reason you need good counsels to articulate your case is because it is the job of the counsel to understand the issues inside out and then argue that in a manner where it is understood, your main points are understood. So, for example, he does make the point in his book. What he says is that it is not correct to assume that just because you have a very good case, you will always win, or that if you have a bad case, you'll always lose. And I think he's one of the counsels who made sure that he, even if it is a bad case, he would articulate it so beautifully that one could not but help being persuaded to his side of the matter.
I want to know something for you. I know Mr. Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria as a workaholic. I've seen you work Sundays, in fact, all days of the week. You put in a lot of hours of hard work. Juxtapose that with eminent jurist Fali Nariman. He not only worked till the age of 95, 2 days before he passed away, 3 lawyers were briefing him in his office for an appearance in Supreme Court. He was getting ready to appear in court. 4 weeks before he passed away, he was in the India International Center behind the mic standing and giving a lecture for 1 full hour. So, what does that tell you about the inspiration that he leaves behind for younger advocates?
I think the lesson is that to be a good, successful advocate, you have to be physically and mentally fit. And physical fitness is something that I've always promised myself that I will work on. And I think, the time has come to do that, to exercise every day, etc. But at the same time, mental agility is a completely different matter altogether. I do believe that the two are related, but it is possible to remain mentally agile to a very, very ripe old age if one keeps busy. I have seen people who retire and do almost nothing while away their time. They may go for the regular evening walks, but then they lose their mental faculties pretty early. So there are many aspects. Any organ of the body atrophies if you're not using it properly. And I think the best way to keep young, regardless of the number, the age on your passport, age is just a number. The best way to keep young is to exercise mentally as well as physically.
One thing I also want to know from you, when you said physically, he was very famous for his walks every day, and he would tell the client that this is my walk time and I don't need to be disturbed, and the clients understood. Do you think that such plain speak is also important for advocates, that they value their work as much as they do their fitness?
I do believe so, but sometimes it becomes a little difficult as well. So again, everyone's body cycle, body clock is very, very different. No matter how much I try, I will always be an owl. So I find it easier to read my briefs till 3, 4 in the morning rather than sleep early and get up at 4 or 5 and read them. It is not the same.
Actually, one thing I would want to know from you is eminent jurist Fali Nariman's social life. Went to Parliament. Also was the president of the Bar Association of India for 2 decades. Never missed opportunities to address people. The other person I know who did so was Nani Palkhiwala. He also never missed an opportunity to address people, and people look forward to his speeches. What does that tell you about a rounded personality that he had? That participates in the bar association, parliament, of course, took up the positions of the ASG and all of that.
So one thing is that both the gentlemen you mentioned were excellent orators. And Mr. Nariman in particular was his speeches were very delightful because they were always filled with certain anecdotes. And, if you consider the fact that here is a person brought up in the 1930s, just think about it. He saw the whole Second World War, and I'm a bit of a history buff, and I read a lot about the Second World War. And he had delightful anecdotes in all his speeches. I just don't know how he did it. But I think a part of that also is because by his very nature, he was a great orator. Now,
and his son inherited that quality.
Yes, in fact, both of them have a phenomenal memory. I do believe that Justice Rohinton Nariman is a morbid. Morbid is a priest. And I remember my mom used to always tell me that, look, if you become a priest, then your memory will remain very, very sharp. Because it's a very rigorous time that they go through, I think over 40 days or something, which I don't know anything about this. But by and large, a person who's a priest has a very good memory.
In fact, one final question I want to ask you is about Fali Nariman's habit. And I know you are very particular about your drafts. You will draft again and again and read out mistakes. They say Fali Nariman was a perfectionist. He used to reread 5 times, 6 times over and perfect his draft. What do you have to say about that quality that he was praised for?
Right. I think it goes back to his desire to be a good orator, because a good orator is about personality. This is one of the reasons why, incidentally, I'm not a great fan of appearing by VC. It is a very useful tool. So if you're appearing in matters which are out of Delhi, or for example, if there is a lawyer in some corner of the country who wants to appear in Supreme Court, it is very useful for him to take advantage of. But by and large, there is no substitute for personal presence. And some of these counsels had that presence. When they walked into court, they commanded attention by their very presence without even uttering a word. And that I think is a huge quality to admire. I was also, recently very heartened to hear one of his speeches. I think way back in September last year, when he spoke about arbitration. And, this is something which I've always been saying. Uh, he said that, look, there is a questionable assumption. I'm now quoting, there's a questionable assumption that an international arbitral award is hardly ever wrong. And that comes from a supreme sense of complacency. And then he added that users of arbitration are not exactly euphoric. And this goes down to the debate which we also often had, whether awards should be challenged and in what manner. And I think there's a fine nuance over there, which is that yes, awards cannot be challenged. They can be challenged on very limited ground that are set out in our statute. But at the same time, one must recognize that if you want arbitration to be well recognized and widespread, then we must make sure that the awards are by and large correct. This comes from peer review and the like. And I think I was really heartened to know that Mr. Nariman shared at least some of my points of view. As far as his social life is concerned, I know that when he came to my second marriage, he was always very punctual. One thing about him. And unfortunately, the Bharat was late. And he came with his wife, who was ailing at that time, and I think she was confined to a wheelchair. And unfortunately, when I reached, The first thing I did is look for him, and he had gone away. And someone told me, oh, he came and went away. And I was really disappointed. Next morning, there was an email from him explaining that, okay, my wife is not too well, and we waited for about 20 minutes and then we left. I hope you enjoyed the function. So that speaks a lot about the man.
That's indeed. Thank you for sharing that personal anecdote about your wedding and Fali Nariman. Indeed, such anecdotes that give a peek into the personality of a man are cherished. And thank you so much for finding time and sharing these anecdotes on Fali Nariman. Appreciate you joining us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.